Hey everyone, it's Hixel Bay here. Today I'm making a special video for you all. I'm going to be giving you my top 5 tips for bioprototype, and these tips are general tips that will help you get through the game a little bit easier. So if you've been struggling with this game to get to stage 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever difficulty, then this is the video for you. So let's jump right into it. These tips will be for any character in the game. Of course, it changes a little bit just based on their natural traits, but it should allow you to learn a thing or two about how you should be approaching your runs, and hopefully it's going to give you a much better experience with this game. Let's go. All right, so tip number 5. This one is something that you should be thinking about right at the beginning of the game, and that is to not waste your cells on rerolls in your early waves. Now this is really important because you want to save those cells for other more useful things, and I'll show you exactly what I mean here. So I'm about to finish wave 1 here, so right at the beginning of my game. And what I mean is on this screen right here, you can hit the R button to refresh or re-roll the shop, and I would actually suggest going against that thought because you want to save those cells. I know that 10 cells at the end of the day doesn't sound like a lot, but at the beginning of your game it is actually a lot, and you can use it on much more useful things in the culture upgrades or your stat upgrades and things like that. So what I would suggest is just grabbing things that make sense at the beginning of your run. So what I would do is I would take a look at your build. So I just hit the tab button there to take a look at my build. Take a look at your last organ. Usually it's a tentacle or something like that with a decent amount of compatibility. So let's see what we can connect to: nerve, spine, retina, cochlea. So I'm just going to take something that can connect to it. Cochlea looks like something that can connect to it, so I'll take that. And then from there, I'm going back into my build again, attach that cochlea. What can this cochlea attach to? Horn or limb? Perfect. So we do have a horn over here, and I'm just going to take that for now. A lot of the time you won't have the perfect or the best options in your first shop or your first few upgrade reward shops here, but that's totally fine. The early game is really easy. You shouldn't have that much trouble with just taking whatever is given to you without re-rolling for your first 5 or 6 waves. So I'm just going to take this horn and then attach that there. So don't re-roll at the beginning of the game. You really want to keep all of your cells for the culture upgrades. And the culture upgrades I'm talking about are over here. As you can see, there's a couple of culture upgrades that only cost 50 cells, so I can buy that next time, or I could possibly grab those cells from recycling some of my organs that I don't end up using on my first pick. So yeah, just really keep those cells for the culture upgrades early game, because that 50 cells in the culture shop is going to give you much more value than gambling away 10 or 20 cells on your rerolls. All right, moving on to tip number 4. So for this tip, it's going to be something that you should be considering throughout the wave, but especially after you choose some rewards, or maybe you bought some rewards from the shop or some organs from the shop. So what you want to do is make sure that you sell any organs that you do not need. And this is really important because you want to accumulate some cells, and if you're not going to use those organs anyways, you should put them somewhere else, of course, right? So here's an example. So this is early game. Again, early game is really important that you build up some cells so that you can take it to the culture shop. And let's just say, I'm in this situation where I just picked up these 2 organs, and I have the spine of the mammoth, and I already have a spine that I really like, and I'm really far away from needing a spine. Yes, I can keep this for a future brain, but honestly, it probably makes more sense to sell this organ off and get other benefits from those cells instead of keeping this spine in here, where I'll probably find other spines when I get that new brain or when I need another spine type of thing. So right now this spine is really useless to me. So I can go ahead and recycle it using the E key, or I can click it down here, and that gives me 30 cells, which I can put into the culture shop immediately. The other thing that you want to consider as a useless cell for you is something without vessels. So this has no vessels, so the vessel count is over here, and that's basically what allows your brain to have additional organs connected to that organ. So this particular organ over here, I'm not going to use this organ. I can't use it right now. It also doesn't have a vessel. It's a type of organ that doesn't really fit my build. So why keep it around? Yeah, maybe I can use it later, but I'll probably find a better one later on anyways that has a vessel or is more suitable for my build. So let's go ahead and sell that. And now I have, double the amount of cells that I had at the beginning of this wave here. So that is tip number 4 for you. All right, moving on to tip number 3. So this tip is related to the first two, really. So you should be doing the first two, which will lead you into what you're doing for this particular tip, which is make sure that you are upgrading economy early. So I'm going to explain which parts of the culture shop I would consider economy. So let's take a look at the culture shop here. So of course, there is 3 right at the top here: organ drop rate, organ quality, and cell duplication chance. So those are the most obvious options in the culture shop that will boost your economy. So economy meaning just basically how do I get more money or how do I get more organs. So organ drop rate is most likely the most popular choice here. A lot of people like to do organ drop rate as their first choice because one, you can use those organs that drop, they may be useful. The other thing is if they're not useful, then we're selling them off or recycling them for cells if we're not using them, just like I described in the last tip. However, one thing that I want to call out is cell duplication chance is something that you should consider as well, because I see it as a safer way in a lot of cases to get more cells or to get more money in this game. Of course, it could even out. The organ drop rate really does depend on, RNG or your luck a little bit. So cell duplication chance, it's definitely going to give you more cells overall, but it's up to you. Play around with it. I would suggest trying organ drop rate or cell duplication chance, seeing what works for you. I usually go all in on one of these. So I'll go, 10 out of 10 on organ drop rate as my priority for the first couple of waves, or try to get 10 out of 10 for cell duplication chance for the first couple of waves. So, some people may try to split it, but I would say just kind of go all in on one of these two. And then once you have both of these upgraded, if that's what you're trying to do at the end game, then organ quality always comes last. So my typical procedure, if I'm doing all 3 of these, is cell duplication chance, organ drop rate, and then organ quality. Go 10 out of 10 on those 3 in that order. The other order that you could take, of course, is organ drop rate, and then cell duplication chance, and then organ quality from there. The other option that I've seen as well is organ drop rate, then organ quality, and then cell duplication chance if you want to put some money into that. But that's a little bit more rare. So one of the first 2 processes would probably be the most common or the most useful for you. The other things that I'm going to call out here is also pickup range. So pickup range is part of economy in my opinion because it allows you to pick up more of those cells that are around you in a bigger range. So you've probably had some runs where you're destroying these monsters off screen or really far away from you, and it's kind of hard to get to all of those cells. So pickup range is a super cheap upgrade. It's 50 cells per upgrade, and it's really easy to clear that out 5 out of 5, and it should allow you to pick up more of those cells, especially if you max out cell duplication chance first. Get some pickup range in there as well, because that will help you, trigger that cell duplication chance as well. The other thing that I also consider economy is movement speed. Now, movement speed does have an incremental cost to it, so it does increase every time you buy 1 point in movement speed. But I would say within your first 2 or 3 waves, I would actually stick a point into movement speed as well, because it allows you to, again, pick up those cells, and it also helps you survive. So picking up 1 movement speed early game is a really good idea. It's super cheap, 50 cells. That's totally worth the price in my opinion. And then put some points into pickup range, especially if you do cell duplication chance. Those are the other 2 things I want to call out that fall outside of the top 3 obvious ones here. So hopefully that helps you get some more money. All right, everyone. Now here's number 2 for you. So this particular tip doesn't look the same for every single build. There's definitely a couple of ways to do this, but what you should be trying to do is find a way to multiply your attacks. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that I like to do it myself. So typically, I actually like to use tentacles for this. The reason being is because tentacles typically have more projectiles, which will allow you to multiply things a little bit easier as well. And the tentacles with pierce or chain work especially well with some of these strategies as well. And I'm going to show you one of the easiest ways to multiply attacks. So we have our tentacle of the swordfish here shooting 3 projectiles, and we're going to attach a cochlea to it. And anything that appears after this cochlea will be multiplied by how many projectiles you have. So just check it out here. I'll use this tentacle of the beetle just to show you an example. So it's really, really important to put this at the beginning of your brain, because if you have a multiplier like the cochlea with that swordfish, as you can see, we're getting way more of those boomerangs from the tentacle of the beetle every single time that these tentacle of the swordfish is shooting out. And it's shooting 3 projectiles, which is having that effect of the beetle come out of every single shot. So that's a really, really easy way to multiply that particular tentacle or whatever else happens after that organ. So you want to make sure that you're doing something like that to multiply the amount of attacks that are coming out of that particular brain there. Now, the other thing that we could have done as well is doing a nerve. So cochleas, like I just used, is a really good option. The other thing that you can do is something like a nerve. So nerves usually trigger when you hit the enemy. Some of them have some other requirements, but this one simply requires you to hit the enemy with the organ to the left here. So after we hit an enemy with this organ, it's going to do the same thing that we had seen before. So as you can see, every single time we hit an enemy, those boomerangs are coming out. And with this particular organ, we're seeing even more boomerangs than last time, because the swordfish organ is able to pierce through the first target and hit more targets as well. So every single time that organ is hitting an enemy and it has that nerve attached where we're sending out boomerangs, every single time that organ hits, it's going to send out those boomerangs. So this is a great example of how you multiply your attacks, which will give you a larger range of damage, and it will also allow you to do some crazy things. And I'll show you an example of how crazy things can get after you start multiplying all of your organs there. So let me find one of my organs over here with intestine. And as you can see, things can get absolutely bonkers if you start adding AoE effects or really strong effects after your first 1 or 2 organs are multiplied. So now that I have those organs together, I'm going to put a intestine on that boomerang, and now we have an even larger amount of area of effect for our damage, because I'm multiplying the boomerangs so often, and now my boomerangs are dropping pools of that fire, or that boomerang can do whatever you want. But now that you started that multiplication, it just gets larger and larger as you add more effects to it. So it's really important for you to make sure that you are adding some kind of multiplying strategy right at the beginning of the brain. Okay, and now we are looking at my number 1 top tip for you, and this one is really important. You won't see me play this game without implementing this particular strategy, and that is to use a fast organ at the beginning of your brain. So let's take a look at the difference here. So I have my brain over here that I was using in the last tip, and if I take that to a test, this spine that I'm using is the spine of the mammoth, which is really slow. The benefit of this particular spine is that the first organ attached to it will be stronger. However, it is much slower. Now, I personally don't think that it's worth it to put a stronger, slower spine at the beginning of your brain, because this organ over here is not supposed to do most of my damage. I'm using it as a carrier. So you really want to combine tip number 2 and tip number 1 as a strategy if you want to get really, really strong. So instead of using something strong at the beginning of your brain, you can leave all of the damage output for the later half of your brain. So I usually use something like a spine of the jackal. This is my favorite spine. I use this on almost every brain, to be honest with you, and that will allow you to deliver more of that first attack, which is multiplying the rest of your attacks. And that's going to give you a much higher damage output, although the organ that is shooting out first is not as strong. It doesn't really matter because you're looking for really all of your damage output to be all the organs that follow your first attack, which you're multiplying. So just remember that because you have a weak organ or a weak spine at the beginning, it doesn't make anything else weaker. The damage output of the following tentacles or the following organs are based on the organs that you're attaching those organs to. So this tentacle of the beetle is not really affected by the efficiency of the spine of the jackal. It's based on the efficiency of whatever you're attaching before it. So nothing in your brain gets weaker because you're using a fast spine at the beginning. In my opinion, it's actually making your build stronger because you're shooting out those attacks a lot quicker, and then you get to those stronger parts of your brain a lot quicker as well. Spines are usually what I go for, but they have been adding new organs that work really well. The other thing that I found is a really good high quality bladder of the martlet is really good because it gains charges every time you walk, and the max charge on these high quality ones is 2. So you get 2 out of 2 charges every step you take basically. So you're going to be firing this off really, really quickly, and you can, spread the effects of whatever follows that particular organ very, very quickly. So we'll take a look at that just as an example. So this bladder of the martlet, as you can see, every single time I'm walking around, we're striking these enemies with lightning, and it's starting to multiply my attacks. So those are the 2 type of organs that I like to use. So either a spine or a bladder of the martlet is typically what I try to use for that. But combining tip number 1 and tip number 2, I guarantee you're going to have some better runs and you're going to do a lot more damage. All right, everybody, so you've heard my top 5 tips to get better at this game. I do have a bonus one here that I wanted to talk about. Now, this will only exist in late game because it does have to do with one of the debuffs that they will give you in higher difficulties, and that is called Mind Overload. So this is not for all players. It is if you are in the late game and you do have Mind Overload kind of unlocked in that particular stage. So my advice here is that you should use less organs if Mind Overload is too taxing. There are some Mind Overload debuffs that really, really hurt you, and you want to make sure that you are using less organs to avoid those particular ones. Now, I don't have a list of all of the Mind Overloads, but we do have one in this example that is pretty nasty. So with Mind Overload, if you have over a certain amount of organs, it's going to activate a certain debuff, and these are always random. They affect things from the starting health that you have. As you can see here, bosses deal additional damage. It can affect a lot of different things. So you want to make sure that you have the right balance of the number of organs that you're using versus what Mind Overload will do to you. And in this particular case, having over 24 organs will give all of my organs 30% less efficiency. So what I can do here is just take a look at my brains if I really want to avoid that because that's really going to hurt me, or if it's one of those other Mind Overload things that just really, really screw up your game. What you can do is take a look at your brains and kind of just think about whether or not you need to have that many organs to win that run. So in this particular case, I have 3 brains with 8 out of 8, which brings me to 24. And then I have this brain over here that's not doing much for me. So let's just say I didn't have any other organs. I'm stuck at this stage in the game where I have, a total of 26 organs and I'm getting this major, major debuff. What I would do in this case is to avoid that Mind Overload, I would just ditch this brain for now until this brain could make it worth it for me. and then I would take on that mind overload because really I'm only doing one attack with this brain, and it's taking 30% of the efficiency, or the 30% of my damage essentially, from all other brains. So I would just stash that for now. Now I'm sitting at 0 out of 8. These are still sitting at 8 out of 8. So I still have 24. But as you can see, that particular debuff from Mind Overload has disappeared. And now I have that 30% efficiency back. So sometimes it's not worth it to have as many organs as you can on your brains if the Mind Overload is really, really, really nasty. So just watch out for that, because I have found myself losing some runs because I just let that mind overload stack up, and there's debuffs in there that really, really hinder my current run because I'm taking more damage, or I start with less health, or whatever. And so I really would suggest taking a look at the mind overload and revising your brain or organ count if you think it's going to hurt you. Well, there you have it, folks. Those are my tips on how to get better at bioprototype. I really hope that you learned something, and if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. I will be putting out more content like this for the other games that I've been playing, so stay tuned for that. If there's anything that you feel like I missed, or if you have any other questions about how to get better at this game, or want to get my thoughts on certain topics, please leave a comment below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, but for now, Hixel Bay out. See you next time. Peace!